takes it in overtime. Brady can chop, breakaway shoots, scores!
Welcome to Sens Talk. My name is Brandon and I'm your host. Today we're going to take a look at the goaltending position for your Ottawa Senators and some potential targets via the trade or free agency markets. Now look, Ottawa is flush with a plethora of elite talent at the defense and forward position. But the lone position where Ottawa has a lot of question marks is at goaltending. Cam Talbot will not be returning next year. Matt Sogaard is not proven to be a full-time NHLer just yet. And Anton Forsberg has dealt with some injury concerns. So let's talk about it and take a look at some of the options out there right now. I also just briefly wanted to mention that I'm not going to discuss players that have not been reportedly put on the market, like UC Saros, for example. And by the way, I'd love to have a guy like UC Saros. He's a fantastic goaltender, top 5 in the National Hockey League, but there's really been no evidence he's been put on the trade market. So for this video, I'm just going to be taking a look at players that have reportedly been put on the market, whether that's via a trade or free agency. Let's take a look. So to kick off today's video, let's take a look at some of the trade options for your Ottawa Senators. And by the way, if Ottawa's going to trade for a goaltender, I'm personally looking for a goaltender that's a long-term option. There's no reason for Ottawa to give up assets for a goaltender that's going to stick around for a year or two. You have plenty of guys in free agency that can do the job for free without giving up assets. And by the way, where Ottawa is right now in terms of the quote-unquote rebuild, it makes no sense for a stopgap trade option. If you're going to trade for a goaltender, he better be your number one goaltender. And speaking of number one goaltenders, here's the first guy I'm going to discuss from the Winnipeg Jets, Vezina Trophy winner, Connor Hellebuyck. Now, he's 30 years old. He has 1 year left on the deal, but he is, like I just said, a Vezina Trophy winner. He's a top 5 goaltender by far in the National Hockey League, and single-handedly has kept the Winnipeg Jets relevant over the last few years. His entire NHL career, he's played 445 games in the National Hockey League, compiling a record of 238 wins, 154 losses, and 37 overtime or shootout losses as well. He has a 2.66 goals against average and a 916 save percentage. Very good numbers, and by the way, 32 shutouts as well. Now, this would have to be a sign-and trade because, look, Ottawa's not going to give up top assets for a top 5 goaltender without assurance that he's going to be around for at least the next few years. And you're probably going to have to give up a top 6 guy, maybe a top draft pick, maybe one of our top young goaltender prospects like Levy or Sogaard, but that's the price you have to pay for elite and number 1 caliber goaltending like you would get with Connor Hellebuyck. And more importantly, this would give Ottawa its first true number 1 goaltender since the Craig Anderson era. It's been a long time. It's been over half a decade now since Ottawa had a true number 1 stable goaltender. Connor Hellebuyck consistently has played 60-plus games per season with Winnipeg, and he can absolutely play the bulk of the starts for Ottawa and would give them a chance to win night after night after night. Now, I asked some of you guys on Twitter this morning to tell me what you would give up for Connor Hellebuyck. Now, look, I understand some of you guys are hesitant to trade for an older goaltender. I don't think 30's old, but he's definitely not young. He's definitely, established in the National Hockey League, basically a veteran at this point, so I understand the hesitancy there. But more importantly, the fact he doesn't have a long-term contract, I can understand that. But based off the replies I got, a lot of you guys think, you could give up a top goaltender prospect like a Matt Sogaard or Levi Merlinen, a couple of draft picks, and maybe a young defensive prospect like a Lassie Thompson, JBD, or whatever. I just don't think that's possible because, once again, Ottawa's not going to trade for Connor Hellebuyck if it's not a long-term option. And if it's going to be a long-term option, you're going to have to give up top assets like a top 6 player, one of those 2 goaltending prospects, and definitely a first-round pick. So personally, I would love to trade for Connor Hellebuyck with the assurance he will stick around long-term. If there's no assurance he's sticking around long-term, no way in my mind I'm trading for Connor Hellebuyck. Now, the next trade target I would look at if I was Pierre Dorion, the general manager of the Ottawa Senators, would be Carter Hart. He's 24 years old, and there's still plenty of room to grow for him, and he has 1 year left on his contract as well. So it's very similar to Connor Hellebuyck. But unlike Connor Hellebuyck, Carter Hart, he's had a solid NHL career so far. He's played just over 200 games. So it's not like he's a veteran by any means, but he's certainly not a rookie either. He's looking for that next step to become an established starting goaltender. He's obviously been playing on a very rough Philadelphia Flyers team over his first few years in the National Hockey League. He is a former top prospect as well. He's a lot of potential still, and at his age, 24 years old, there's room to grow. So if you sign Carter Hart for a few years, he can grow with this young core as well here in Ottawa. So that makes him very attractive for me. Now, his career stats, like I just mentioned, 201 games in the National Hockey League with an 84-26 record, with a 2.96 goals against average and a 906 save percentage, with 5 career shutouts. Now, by the way, just remember, he played on the Philadelphia Flyers, who have been terrible the last couple of years. He had some rough games as well in Philly, no doubt about it, but the team in front of him certainly did not do him any favors. Now, he's a former top prospect, like I just mentioned, and has had a rough go in Philly on a bad team. In my opinion, he is worth a shot as a tandem option that can play the majority of the starts. Once again, he's a former top prospect. He absolutely killed it in the WHL. He's had some inconsistencies in the National Hockey League, of course. That's what happens when, one, you're on a bad team, and two, you're a young goaltender. Remember, goaltenders often hit their prime far later than forwards and defensemen. They usually hit it at like 27, 28. Goaltenders usually hit their prime around 32, 33. Carter Hart, actually at 24 years old, is ahead of the curve. Often goaltenders take far longer to develop. Remember, he was put into the National Hockey League right away. So being 24 years old, having that room to grow makes him a very attractive long-term option for me via a trade for the Ottawa Senators. He as well has some experience as well. So it's not like you're throwing Carter Hart to the Wolves like we did with Matt Sogard last year, because he does have NHL experience. Now, once again, he only has 1 year left on the contract, so obviously he will need to be extended, but I'm not so worried about extending Carter Hart compared to Connor Hellebuck, because Carter Hart is looking for somewhere to establish himself, and with Philadelphia reportedly being interested in trading him, there doesn't seem to be a long-term option there in Philly for Carter Hart. He would absolutely, in my opinion anyways, be interested in signing long-term here in Ottawa. They have a young core, they have an exciting future, and he could be a part of that as the starting goaltender. It seems to be a perfect fit. Let's see what happens. Now, the last option for trade options from what we've seen in the trade market thus far is Thatcher Demko of the Vancouver Canucks. He's 27 years old, and unlike the other two goaltenders on this list, he has 3 years left on his deal with a $5 million cap hit. Now, in his career, he's played in 168 games with an 81-67-15 record, a 2.90 goals against average, and a 910 save percentage with 3 career shutouts. Now, when healthy, Thatcher Demko has the potential to be a top 10 goaltender and has been a top 10 goaltender at times on a very mediocre, in my opinion, Vancouver Canuck team. And he's about to hit his prime as well at the age of 27. He's about to hit the best years of his hockey career. And most importantly, we don't have to worry about re-signing him for at least the next few years, which is very attractive for me. This gives guys like Levi Merlainen and Matt Sogard the ability to grow and develop without having to be rushed, and as well gives a guy like Anton Forsberg a bit of a rest. He doesn't have to have the entire load on his back. You can have a guy like Thatcher Demko start the bulk of the games. So Thatcher Demko is an attractive option, but to hit his prime, he has 3 years left on the deal and gives Ottawa options in terms of easing Forsberg's workload, and more importantly, letting Levi Merlainen, Matt Sogard, Kevin Mandolisi, these guys in the AHL and the ECHL develop properly. Unfortunately, this year we saw Matt Sogard thrown to the Wolves far too early. Thatcher Demko could be a perfect stopgap option there for at least a few years, and if not, even longer if it works out. It's a good option there in my opinion. Now that's it for trade options. Let's take a look at some free agent and RFA options. Now let's take a look at some free agent and RFA options for the Ottawa Senators. Now look, with free agents and RFAs, I'm primarily looking for a 1 year stopgap option. I just want to say that right now. There's a couple of guys on the free agent market like Tristan Jarry and stuff that could be long-term options. I just don't find them attractive, and I don't really find it practical, especially on the free agent market. They're going to command far too high of a cap hit for the Ottawa Senators, in my opinion. Now let's start off with Semyon Varlamov. He's 35 years old, and he has posted an above 910 save percentage nearly every single season in his illustrious NHL career. He's played over 15 years in the National Hockey League. He is the definition of a veteran. He's played in 583 games with a 272, 220, and 64 record, with a 916 save percentage and a 2.65 goals against average with 38 career shutouts. Now, Varlamov could be the perfect experience option to form a 1A, 1B tandem with Anton Forsberg and potentially Matt Sogard. It gives Sogard as well the ability to slowly transition to a full-time NHLer instead of forcing him into many NHL games like we did last year with him. Now, the one downside with Semyon Varlamov is the fact he made $5 million last year with the New York Islanders. He likely would want $3 to $4 million. I just don't know if Ottawa firstly could afford a $3 to $4 million backup goaltender, and second, if Pierre Dorion would even be interested in doing so just for 1 year. The Ottawa Senator cap situation is very tight, especially with the expected extension with Alex DeBrincat, whether that's a qualification offer or a long-term extension. By the way, a bit of a teaser. Be on the lookout early next week for a video on the Alex DeBrincat contract extension situation. But yeah, Ottawa has a very tough cap situation right now, and I just don't know if it makes sense to bring in a goaltender via free agency, who probably will get some other offers as well for 3 to 4 at the very least. $1 million on the cap hit. It's just a lot of money. Now, another player that Ottawa can look at, not in free agency, but on the RFA market, is Jeremy Swayman of the Boston Bruins. Now, he is 24 years old and has reportedly been made available by the Boston Bruins. Now, he is an RFA, so he would require an offer sheet, which we don't see often. But with Boston's cap situation, there's definitely an opportunity here for a team like Ottawa and others to scoop Jeremy Swayman from the Boston Bruins. Now, Swayman as well likely will be looking for a more long-term fit with a new team, especially with Linus Ullmark likely going to be the starting netminder in Boston for years and years and years to come. Now, Swayman in 88 games in the National Hockey League has posted a 54, 23, and 7 record with a 2.24 goals against average and a .920 save percentage with 9 shutouts. Some very impressive numbers for a young NHL goaltender. Now, like I just said, he's young and he hasn't played over 100 games. So he's not a proven regular NHL starter by any means. He hasn't proven anything, but he's absolutely shown glimpses of what he can do. He as well is a similar age to the rest of the roster, so he has the potential to grow with the team as well as guys like Stützle and Tkachuk and whatever grow as well. We don't see offer sheets much in the National Hockey League, but like I just mentioned, Boston is up against the cap big time. And more importantly, Jeremy Swayman probably doesn't even want to stick around long term. It just makes sense for both sides to move on. As well, Jeremy Swayman is on his entry-level contract, so Ottawa likely wouldn't even have to give up much if they offer sheeted Jeremy Swayman from Boston. Probably only a 3rd or 4th round pick, which is pennies on the dollars for a guy like Jeremy Swayman and the potential he has in the National Hockey League. Ottawa even could sign him for a couple years on a prove-it contract, and worst case, it doesn't work out. At best case, he blossoms into one of the best young goaltenders in the National Hockey League. He certainly has shown glimpses he's capable of doing so, but once again, he's not proven, which is why I would not sign him long-term. This is more of a stopgap option, but I think he has the resume, he has the potential, and he has the youthful ability. You know, he's only 24, he's young, to potentially be a long-term option for Ottawa. I just don't think you can throw all your money at him right now. He hasn't proven himself just yet, in my opinion, to be a full-time starter at this level. Now, that's the end of the video. Let me know what you think, of course, in the comment section down below as usual. I didn't mention all the goaltenders because look at your screen. There are so many goaltenders available at the free agent and RFA market. Mackenzie Blackwood is one of those guys as an RFA as well, like Jeremy Swayman. But with free agents, you got Jonas Korpisalo. I think LA probably re-signs him, which is why I didn't mention him. Freddie Anderson, I'd expect he wants a final big payday. He's 35 years old. Don't really see him as an option. But he's definitely somebody that Ottawa can look at as a one-year option. Tristan Jarry, as I kind of mentioned earlier, he's an inconsistent goaltender at 27 years old who will absolutely want a massive payday. It's a hard pass for me. I'd also expect Pittsburgh probably to resign him as well. And Antti Raanta as well as another guy, but he has a bit of an injury history in the National Hockey League, so I'm not too comfortable bringing him in as a starter. But as a stopgap option, as a 1A, 1B with Forsberg, yeah, he's probably okay. But once again, just wanted to mention those other potential stopgap options as well, because there's just so many goaltenders. I couldn't discuss them all. I just wanted to discuss the ones that I find to be most likely available for the Ottawa Senators and fit within their cap parameters. Now, besides that, thank you all for watching. I'll see you on Tuesday to talk about Alex DeBrincat and his potential next contract with the Ottawa Senators. So besides that, I'll see you all then. Go Sens, go.